You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Before we get into our discussion today, you mentioned something that I would like to get your further insights into, and that is the current muddying of the conspiratorial waters or the infiltration of the truth community. Throughout our history, anything that we've considered good or truthful has unfortunately been co-opted or infiltrated in some way. Whether it's intentional by accident, whether there are folks at higher levels trying to destroy certain movements or get them going in a certain direction, or it's just individuals that want their own 5 minutes of fame or to stir up the narrative themselves in some way, we get a lot of bad information. And now with the age of social media and TikTok and everything like we were just discussing before the show, it gets hard. It gets hard to decipher some of the information that's coming through. And I think that it's become more intentional as of late, as more people seem to be awakening to these things and becoming more aware that there is a deception. But the problem is that there are too many people that don't do their due diligence when it comes to research, or they just want to get out there to muddy the waters, and it causes a huge problems for folks like yourself and myself and people that come on my show who really did work to try and find out what's going on, and that's a huge problem right now, and I don't see that getting any better anytime soon.
No, I actually just did a show on this on the Secret Teachings with Ryder Lee from Raised by Giants. We had a good conversation about this, and he talked a lot about various UFO cults and how today the UFO community is basically recycling a lot of the talking points from those UFO cults, a lot of the same ideologies. And then, of course, I don't know if a lot of your listeners, I don't know if they listen to my show, but if you haven't, you go back and listen to that show. It's in the archive at thesecretteachings.info. I was discussing, from my point of view, my experience in the UFO community, but also one of the popular UFO documentaries, Mirage Men, which is a very well-documented history of infiltration of UFO groups. I think in my opinion, the best way to explain this and to sort of break it down into digestible bits is I look at the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, 1918 in Russia. And when the communists took over Russia, they overthrew the Tsar. Sometime in the early to mid 20s, they had this campaign. It was a counterintelligence campaign called Operation Trust, and that operation was intended. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so Operation Trust was intended, for anybody who doesn't know, it was intended to basically find anybody who was a political dissident, anybody who was an opponent of the Communist Party or the Communist State, even people that were more moderate. And about 30 years and change later, in communist China, Mao Zedong did something very similar. It was called the 100 Flowers campaign. And they encouraged people to write letters and tell the government what they thought of how the country was being run. And people were actually skeptical at first, but Mao and the party said, no, it's okay. You can tell us what you think. People told them what they thought, and then they disappeared. And something very similar has happened in the last, I'd say, 10 years to make sure we get the ends of this. But in the last probably 5 to 8 years, especially with QAnon, which the whole hashtag of that, the whole talking point slogan of that was trust the plan. Yes. I call it Operation Trust the Plan. And I'm not politically minded per se. I guess you could call me a conventional, traditional constitutionalist. But when it comes to the issue of politics, and I'm not even sure what you think or feel about this, but whether it's the political left or the political right, I mean, most major movements they're cults.
Yes.
Ufology is a cult. I like some of the things that Donald Trump did as president, but the MAGA movement is a cult.
Yes.
The abortion issue is a cult of people that just want abortion's the only thing that matters. And I think so much, I mean, it doesn't matter, again, if it's abortion or if it's UFOs. So much is based on conjecture. It's based on not questioning and simply believing whatever the party tells you, whether that's the Communist Party or that's the Planned Parenthood Party or that's the ufologist con men UFO monopoly party.
Yes.
And so when you start to dig deeper, I mean, we don't need to talk about abortion, but like abortion's a really great example because it's such a hot topic. If you actually look at the laws prior to Roe versus Wade getting overturned in conservative states, it was a lot more difficult or a lot more easy to get an abortion than people thought. And in liberal states, it was a lot more difficult to get an abortion than people thought. Supreme Court decisions, and we can apply this understanding to UFOs and to the paranormal, to anything. Supreme Court decisions aren't black and white discussions where it's like yes and no. They're like hundreds and hundreds of pages of the court's opinion and then the dissenting opinions of the other judges. And I use that as an example because when we look at UFOs, when we look at symbolism, when we look at conspiracies, it's kind of like that. They're not simple yes or no things. They're complex. If they were written out, they would be hundreds and maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages of analysis of why some events that we see, things in the sky, are not alien space ships. Most of them are not. I'd assume 99.99% are not. There's always that possibility, I suppose. But the point is, it's more detailed. It's more complex. It's not a simple yes or no. And I think we have to be really careful, no matter what we're interested in, even if it's mainstream stuff, because everything seems to be reduced in the mainstream and the alternative to simple black and white issues, lots of conjecture and lots of fallacy.
100%. And right now we have the cult of government working with the cult of ufology together because of the new revelations that have been coming from daddy government and the Pentagon. So it's okay now to discuss these things, but we're still not going to get any tangible evidence of any of this, and we have to blindly put faith and blindly believe in what our leaders are telling us about UFOs and the possibilities of extraterrestrial life. So we've got a double whammy when it comes to the cult situation, a triple whammy, a quadruple, because we're surrounded by just cult activity right now, and it's all a matter of do you want to join some kind of egotistical leader that is only trying to lead you in a direction because it feeds their own ego and the agendas of those above them, or do you just want to live your life? So we're in interesting times right now, for sure.
And I think we're always in interesting times, especially if you pay attention.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I think this is the thing that you can build like an understanding of the occult and symbolism and archetypes and all that. You can build that from the ground up. And I say the ground up, I'm referencing like politics, like something that people are involved in every day, arguing about, debating about. Again, I'm not saying political parties are cults. I'm saying that movements are cults.
Yeah.
And I agree. I like the idea of "Make America Great," but it's a slogan, and America's already great compared to a lot of countries in the world, and Americans don't have any perspective on that. It's a slogan. No more malarkey, whatever that was supposed to mean from Joe Biden. It's a slogan. It doesn't. They don't have any meaning outside of the immediate context of the group and the group identity. And it's group identity politics that drove communist China, that drove the Soviet Union, and it's driving what we call liberal democracies in the world too, group, collective, hive mind identities. And that also, I feel, is, and actually I know, that is also something that I don't know if a lot of folks recognize the similarity between the political and ideological cults and techno cults or technology cults, in the sense that we're waiting for someone to take a wire and plug it into our head, and then we're all connected to the Ray Kurzweil, Google, CIA hive mind. Nobody needs to plug anything into your head. You don't need to be in the Matrix movie being plugged in on the Nebuchadnezzar. You get plugged into that when you use social media. You get plugged into that when you believe in the hive mind collective ideology of political movements or alternative movements, etc. That's the hive mind. And when you start to recognize that kind of stuff, if you pay attention to archetypes, mythology, symbols, I want to give you a really great example. It's something that I never went looking for. It's just something I noticed because my personal interest is I love mythology and I love symbolism and I love the history of magic and what all those things mean. And my favorite myth, I'd say one of my favorite myths, probably top 3,